Welcome to the Cineposium podcast. I'm Martin Ibarra Ramos.
And I'm Alex Apicella.
Thank you all for joining us again this week for our latest episode. In case you missed our last episode, curated by Kylie Harris, we discussed Daniel Goldhaber and Issa Mizai's 2018 film, Cam. And we had a great conversation about the film, its approach to depicting a cam sex worker, its thematic structure and tone, and other relevant and important topics. So we certainly recommend you all check out that episode if you haven't had the chance yet. And we have another great show for you today. So Alex, why don't you let them know how the show works?
Every week we're going to be inviting members or collaborators of Cineposium to curate a film for us for remote viewing. And then we're going to be having a conversation about the film on this podcast. New episodes of the podcast are going to be published every Thursday. And we have always various members who have been coming on recently to discuss with us and our curators. So this week's curator is Liwen Wang, and also joining us is Ben Lee. So why don't we get into it? Take it away.
Hi everyone, I'm Liwen Wang, and this week I'd like to introduce two films released this year, Tigertail and The Half of It, in dialogue with the robust discussion of representation in cinema, while identifying the universality in these works. And to begin with, Tigertail, directed by Alan Young, co-creator of comedy series Master of None. Tigertail is a semi-biographical story of his father's journey to the West. Set in 1950s Taiwan, Pin Rui has long wished for moving to the States so as to provide his mother, who labors at the same factory as him, a better life. As the story unfolds, however, we see the compromise he needs to make, the loss he has to bear, and the bond he endeavors to mend. This is a coming-of-older-age story about a Taiwanese-American immigrant, yet Tigertail does not wish to color itself as a piece merely on cultural differences and exotic experiences. So, if one is expecting to see a bunch of Taiwanese-ness portrayed in the film, one may not be satisfied. Rather than one of the collective mass used to epitomize Chinese culture, the protagonist, Pin Rui, is simply a middle-aged man with internal struggles and a sorrowful past. Such individualization is not quite a lack of culture, but a touch of universality, a reminder to viewers that he is just a man. Asian Americans are too just people, like you and me. On the other hand, The Half of It undercurrents this touch of universality with a Chinese-American lesbian protagonist, which is not often seen in popular cinema. Directed by Alice Wu, who is well known for her queer romantic comedy, Saving Face, The Half of It similarly presents us a queer teen romantic comedy. Ellie, the protagonist, is asked by a school athlete to ghostwrite love letters to his crush. In desperate need of money, Ellie agrees to the deal playing Serrano. However, while growing to become friends with the athlete, she finds herself uncontrollably drawn to his crush. Indeed, this may appear to be one of those Serrano tropes in the rom-com genre, or even primarily a LGBTQ work on sexuality discovery, headlining, immigrant representation. Yet, unpacking this marketing code, what the audiences are shown is a story at its core on how to communicate love in all relationships. Likewise, in Tigertail, Ellie is no longer portrayed as an epitomized figure of lesbian sexuality and/or Chinese culture, but a young girl endeavoring to convey her thoughts with friends, family, the world, and vice versa. While discovering her queerness, she's also learning to be a more loving daughter and supportive friend. Moreover, even though The Half of It does not situate itself primarily as an immigrant story, the story of Pin Rui might very possibly be the story of Ellie's fathers, and that resonates greatly with a fair amount of immigrants that trek to America, or arguably everyone that has voyaged to somewhere far from home just to pursue a better life. And as the saying goes, the more specific your story is, the more universal it becomes. I hope you guys could enjoy these two films, and also bear in mind, diversity is about all of us and about us having to figure out how to walk through this world together. And this is a quote from the American author Jacqueline Woodson. Thank you all.
Thank you, Liwen. That was very well said. So usually we kick off these conversations on the films with, I guess, sort of reactions to watching them in preparation for our conversation. So I don't mind starting. I'll say this was a really, really nice pairing that you put together, Liwen. I actually had the opportunity to watch both of them this morning, back to back before recording, and it was, I have to say, it was really, really an interesting pairing for me because, you know, as you say, they're both a lot about, you know, diversity in the story, and you know, there's some important themes that are also, even though I'm not particularly of these cultures, still feel familiar and relevant to me. But I was particularly interested in the variations of tone, because, so I started with the half of it, which kind of seems to go back and forth between a lighthearted tone and some serious tones, and some heartwarming elements, a lot about friendship, and then we kind of switch over to Tigertail, which for me felt a little more poetic, expressionistic, and was more about a feeling for me, and I appreciated that sort of transition, just to kind of see what we can, I guess, the variety that we can get in these kinds of stories, and different approaches that can be offered, and really enjoyed both films. If you guys want to respond, or if you want to give your own reactions.
Yeah, I think I also watched both of the films, and I think it is, of course there are some degrees of, like, because, you know, I do have the same ethnicity as the protagonists, but I don't have the exact same background, and as a matter of fact, our life backgrounds are like are kind of kind of different, and there are a certain degree of alienation. But what I do appreciate about these two films is that they kind of face the alienation, you know, head on, and basically takes me as an audience through the experience of alienation, and basically expresses that, you know, nobody is like, there's no group of people where everybody is the same. There must be a certain degree of alienation among all of us, and the thing is to face this alienation, and in this way, basically we are, you know, at the same time bond closer together, and I especially felt this kind of the half of it especially gives me this kind of feeling, when you know, the protagonist does have a very, like, different you know, experience than me, but I am really drawn to her as she is navigating through this, you know, very, you know, complicated network of alienation, to be honest.
Yeah, I had picked up Tigertail after Lee, when you had done your master's presentation on it, because I was really interested in, like, the I think you were talking about specifically, like, the dialect, or like the accent work, or the language in general, of the film, which, like, I'm, like, always just fascinated with, because I don't, especially, like, if I don't speak the language, like, I'm for some reason just always very interested in, like, differences in, like, just language and, like, linguistics, in, like, even if I don't speak the language. um and so, like, I'd like very much, like, enjoyed Tigertail when I had watched it, and paying attention to, like, the language in it, and I'd never heard of the half of it, which was not at all like what I had been expecting. Like, I'm, like, vaguely familiar with, like, Alice Wu's like other works, mostly like I'd never seen any of them, but like I always like see the name kind of like circulating around like the GLAAD Media Awards and such. And I felt that like the half of it was going to be, yes, I was actually worried that the half of it was going to be like that Love Simon type film, and I was incredibly like excited and thrilled that it was not that Love Simon film. I mean, I personally have some issues with Love Simon. We don't need to get into that. The fact of the matter is that like the film is not only good at like representing like queer, like immigrant Asian romance. It's like you don't see this, like especially with like lesbian films in particular, which, like, you know, no shade to Carol, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, Blue is the Warmest Color, or like The Miseducation of Cameron Post, but like it's all very white, and it's all very American, and it's all very like tragedy, like I not always tragedy, but like very heavily steeped in some kind of like angst or um like yeah, just like not like it's they're never like truly happy feel good films, but like then this one like leaves me like so happy at the end, like even though like the two characters like don't get together, like Ellie at like the end like goes off and like she starts like a new journey in life, and like that's really exciting, and like you feel happy for her. And yeah, no, I liked it. It was a good movie.
Yeah, so I did talk about like language accent in my capstone paper, and also there's also like a hint of language accent being portrayed in the half of it, especially when Ellie was talking about why his father only had the opportunity to be at the train station, because she said they later discover that it's not only what he knows that may be beneficial for his career, but also his English need to be perfect, or perhaps in some degrees in real life, sometimes accent would be an obstacle for you to perhaps deliver things, but then some people may just perceive the accent as whether they are good at a language or they are authentic enough to be portraying something. And also, as for what you talked about the half of it, and yes, that was also my reaction, because I was initially anticipating something like Love Simon or another sexuality discovering film, but then the portrayal of friendship and kinship is actually the focus and what makes it stand out from other films. And yeah, that's what I perhaps like the most, because sometimes I'm a bit like already overwhelmed by the big amount of sexuality discovery themes in LGBTQ films. So yeah, this is like a refreshing take.
I certainly agree with that. It definitely felt like a refreshing take, and I think what stood out to me was I think it was either in quote or in voiceover at the start of the film when we either read the line or hear the words that essentially something to the degree of no one is going to get what they want, that this is a different kind of love story. And that, I think, perfectly set the pace for me in terms of forget what you're expecting. Because, I mean, I also didn't know anything about this film going in, and you were the first person that introduced it to me. And yeah, I don't know that I had necessarily expectations, but maybe just sort of unconsciously there was something of like, this is going to be this sort of archetypal type of coming of age, friendship love story. But it is unlike anything else I've seen, and I really I really did appreciate that element to it. It certainly felt refreshing, and yeah, I don't know if as you were saying, Alex, if it's necessarily a happy ending. I mean, it is in some ways, and in some ways maybe it's just kind of poignant and kind of feels like this is what these characters needed, more so than this is their happy ending. At least is how I'm interpreting it.
Yeah. Speaking of the ending, I really think that's a brilliant touch. In the half of it, it has all the diverse and complex experiences that one can that one can feel at that certain moment in life. It has discovery and unknownness and a touch of melancholy, and I think it's quite brilliant. And sincere moment. Alex talked about like how to treat queerness on screen, and I feel like this film, because the half of it has been like has had a lot of like celebration even before its release, and I can see on the media that they're using the combination of Asian and queer as a like a big selling point, and of course that'll work. But after watching the film, I would say that it's way more than the selling point to the creators of this film. And that's what I appreciate about this film, because if you are coming from a point of sincerity rather than to try to like cater to somebody, then this film, I really don't think this film is trying to cater to anybody by combining the character's Asian background and her queerness. I feel like it's basically just sincerely telling the story, and that resonates with Liwen's point about authenticity as well.
Yeah, and I was also thinking about how it meticulously used queerness and Asian American as kind of like a background info. So you know that at the back of your head, but it is not like blatantly told to you, or perhaps like Ellie writing on her book or telling people about her identity and stuff. It's just placed there as a background element, and I think that's what we need more in like cultural representation or minority representation on screen. It's that subtle use of, it's like just not generalizing, but kind of normalizing and viewed as just as it is. And yeah, that's a nice take for me.
So we've been touching on this immigrant story element to both of these films a little bit, and it's something I'd like to maybe talk a little further, because I do think that there's an interesting connective tissue between both films and how that kind of element or theme is depicted, because for me it's also kind of tied to the relationship between parent and child, right? Like I don't recall if Ellie in the half of it, and I can't remember the daughter's name in Tigertail, but if they were both born in the United States, I think they were. But so it's interesting to kind of consider how the films depict what their parents go through, and kind of how life can, in a way, be about the choices we make, and how we in turn deal with those choices, but also how much more in the case of the half of it, I think about how difficult it can be, because something that stood out to me was the element that her father has this PhD, but it's from China, and so he's kind of stuck in this position that he has with this sort of train. This is something interesting to me. I wonder if you guys have any thoughts on this.
Actually, I feel like Ali's father is my favorite character, because like I feel like, I don't know why, but I'm always drawn to like middle-aged characters in a very like in some kind of crisis, and in her father's case it's exactly because of alienation that her father can't really move any further, and I feel like that's a very sincere and at the same time really expressive kind of depiction of this character, especially that reminds me of the protagonist in Tigertail, who is also who has this all his abilities, but at the same time has to work in a work in a store, I think. And I feel like sometimes it's really fascinating to and really really touching to see like these characters, you know, moving, you know, trying very hard to move forward when their age, their ethnicity, their background, and even language is you know, is stopping them so hard, and you know, the future is really hard to see, and I feel like that's a great, I'd say, juxtaposition with, you know, Ali's character, and I feel like that brings a different perspective to this film.
Yeah, and it's only when I'm programming these two films that it came to realize that the story in Tigertail might as well be like an extension of the half of it. Like Ellie's father's story might as well be Pinrei's story. And also, on a side note, Pinrei's girlfriend in Taiwan is actually the actress is the same one as the one who portrayed Ellie's late mother, and that's also like another resonance. So yeah.
Wow, did not know that. That's so fascinating. But I agree that all the sense that it kind of feels like in a way like a sort of separated sequel to the half of it. That's a really interesting point. I can totally see it. I think there is, again, calling to this this coupling or this dynamic between parent and child. Child being born in the United States has a stronger sense of, you know, culture and business and just, again, language as well, sort of helping their parents along and having to grow up faster, which is, I think we see more explicitly in the half of it, but I do feel like that's another shared theme in both films. And it's, at least in my case, you know, my parents immigrated here from Mexico and from Ecuador, and I have to say it certainly resonated with me.
My family, I'm third generation Italian, immigrated from from southern Italy, and it's interesting to see like that for some reason, and I think it's because like Italian immigration to the U.S. has like a very specific kind of history and particularly reputation when it comes to Hollywood cinema. How little this actually like ends up resonating, but I think that that's like, you know, I think that like, you know, speaks to kind of like the differences like if you're immigrating while like white or white passing versus immigrating from like South America or China or, you know, any country where like the US has very specifically decided to like devalue like these particular areas of the world. But yeah, like it's very interesting because like my grandpa still doesn't speak English very well, but he's very much he doesn't have to like he has decided that like he is going to speak Italian only, and that is just how he's going to live his life, and he doesn't care like, and he doesn't have to care because like no one ever goes like, why aren't you speaking English, this is America, to him, you know, like there's never like that element of yeah, because like they just assume that like it's fine, that like he understands what people are telling him and he does it, and but like he's very content to try to keep that language root there. So it's interesting.
Yeah, that reminds me of a story. You know, when I first came to America, you know, I came with my parents, and you know, they wanted to ensure that, you know, I can, you know, I can safely, I don't know, transition to a new like kind of lifestyle, and then we went to, my mom have a friend here in America, and he took us to Newport Beach, I think, and there are, you know, a fair amount of like rich people over there, and we are walking on the pavement, and there's a I think there's a like old man jogging, and you know, we were walking on the pavement. I don't think we blocked his way, but he just ran in, you know, face to face to my mom and tell her to like to get out of his way, basically. And I was like, dude, like my mom is probably as rich as you. Like, do you like are you this rude to your fellow rich friends, or other people in this like community? Like even though she is not as rich as you, like you guys are all like humans, and I just feel like, you know, and my mom can't speak English, so she thought like she really has no way to like understand, or she's just trying her best to understand why that old man is yelling at her, and that man just quickly just left. And I felt really like helpless at that moment, because, you know, I just came to America for the first time for several days, and you know, I really don't know what to do either. So that's a really like embarrassing moment for me, especially. Yeah.
I was also thinking of some stories of mine, and as for like language passing or language delivery, I was thinking about when I was back in Taiwan, and there would always be perhaps some friends that are mixed, but then when they are perhaps speaking English not exactly perfect, they would be excused. But then if some of my friends, when we were in debate competitions and they were delivering the perfect content or saying the perfect arguments, but then they would be inhibited in some ways by their accent, and perhaps sometimes if the judge is not qualified enough, or if the judge has their own bias, they perhaps would not want to listen that attentive to some of my friends that perhaps have a accent. Yeah.
I think that was part of something that was like super interesting to me between the two films as well, was that it didn't seem like it was like, neither of the films seemed like they were trying to like the films are so personal and so like specific to like these two families, like specific like experiences, that like it didn't feel like it was trying to like make a larger statement about like the generalized difficulties of immigrating to the US when you speak a different language, which I thought was like very interesting, because like I don't know, like I feel like a lot of movies that I see like kind of are, you know, sacrificing the personalization and like the specificity for the sake of like doing like this broad um like oversweeping like attempt to, you know, like really embody like every single experience and every single struggle and like every single triumph that like you may or may not have. And I felt like that was part of like what was like so compelling, was that like they didn't experience everything, because no one really experiences everything. And yeah, I don't know, I thought like that to me was like super authentic as well, where it was like like sometimes like not all struggles apply to all people, you know. And it's like, yeah, it's particularly like when it comes to like Tigertail and like the move from uh PhD to, or yeah, that was Tigertail, right? Where the father has like the PhD, the other film. Sorry, I like watched them back to back when I rewatched it. The half of it had the father has like the PhD, and then he has to do like the PhD is not recognized, and he has to do like lower labor. Like that's like super specific to his context. Like, you know, not everyone is gonna have to struggle with, you know, moving with a PhD. And yeah, I don't know, it was interesting to see similarities and differences.
I'm very excited to see like your well reception of this film, and yeah, so perhaps relatively to the half of it, Tigertail may not be like the perfectly portrayed story, or it may sometimes be too expressionist and stuff, but I feel like that's, if you know the effort and you see the effort in the film, it's what makes it valuable, and it's what makes it stand out. It's like the film just released all its burden to take up the responsibility, portray a specific immigrant, but it's now just trying to tell a story of his father. And yeah, that's what I like most about Tigertail. It's not that much about the content, but I really like the effort and the endeavor the director is trying to use in his film.
Well, thank you very much, Liwen, for programming this episode for us. I was really delighted to watch these films, and I think they'll stick with me. Particularly, I may watch these again in the future because I really, really enjoyed them, and we hope you all enjoy them as well. And thank you as well, Ben, for joining us. We're excited to have you back on the show soon for your own program, so everyone be on the lookout for that. And Liwen, we hope to have you back soon. And so that about does it for our show this week. We hope you all enjoyed the conversation, and whether you're a returning listener or if this is your first time with us, we appreciate you tuning into our show. Please subscribe to the show on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts, and please spread the word. You can follow us on Instagram at Cineposium and on Twitter at Cposium to keep up with our updates and to keep in communication with us. If you're interested in subscribing to our weekly e-newsletter, email us at cineposium.ucla@gmail.com. Thank you all again for listening. Until next week, take care, everyone.